If you want to increase your close rate and stop losing deals to competitors, you need to master discovery. That's the right questions at the right time in the right way. Now, in today's session, I'm breaking down exactly how the top tech sellers uncover pain, build urgency, and drive decisions with better discovery. Hey, I'm Marcus Shan, former #1 sales director at Syndos Corporation, where I led a 110-person sales organization to profitably deliver over $190 million a year. And now I'm a sales training coach to the fastest growing companies and reps in the world. Now, here's a hard truth. Weak discovery equals lost deals. If you're asking the wrong questions, or worse, just taking what the prospect says at face value, you're losing control of your deals. That means more stalled deals, surprise objections, and wasted pipeline. That's costing you money. Now, in today's video, you'll see a live session I did with the Sell Better team and over 200 sales leaders and reps, in which I uncovered 4 key things. Number 1, the most powerful discovery questions that uncover real pain. Number 2, how to navigate multiple stakeholders and uncover the true decision maker. Number 3, how to avoid weak, outdated questions that kill your credibility. And number 4, how to use discovery to drive urgency and eliminate objections. I'll be pulling frameworks right from my proven playbook, 6-Figure Sales Secrets. And if you stick around to the very end, I'll share a simple tweak that can instantly boost your close rate in your very next call. Let's dive in.
Do you have an overall philosophy on discovery before we jump in?
Yeah, I think ultimately we get stuck into the sales stage process. We're like, hey, first we're going to book a meeting, we're going to have discovery, then we're going to do a demo, then we're going to do a proof of concept, blah, 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 whatever, depending on your sales process. And I think it's good, it's useful to understand as a whole. But what I always think about from a philosophy perspective is discovery is really a phase. It's really a philosophy. It's a way of thinking your entire process. So you should always be thinking, how can I learn more about the situation on every single interaction with your prospect? And when you think this way, you don't think of, I did my discovery, I'm good to go. You're thinking of, hey, wherever I am in the quote unquote sales process, I'm going to continue to dive in deeper and uncover more what's going on. Because every time you have a meeting with your prospect, there's time that goes between that last meeting to that current meeting. Things change all the time, whether it's them, their needs, their wants, their desires, internal initiatives, stakeholder changes, etc. And the worst thing we can do is just assume nothing has changed. So in today's question, what we're going to dive into today, these are ones where, frankly, they're going to be probably uncomfortable for a good majority of you to want to ask. But the most beautiful part is these are the types of questions when you actually uncover early on and throughout the process, it'll actually increase your win rate and it'll help you better qualify opportunities. And on top of that, we know a sales process is never linear. So when you uncover some of the details in the process, this allows you to set different next steps to potentially eliminate objections that might occur down the road. So that's why, from a philosophy perspective, ABC, it doesn't stand for always be closing, it's always be curious. If you have that mind space of that, you're going to run a better discovery for the entire process, and you'll have better control on your deals because you're always thinking of the next steps and how you want to get ahead.
I like that a lot. Always be curious. So we're not just limiting our discovery to this one step in the phase and it's only going to happen in the beginning. As things come up, we can dig in and ask more questions.
100%.
So I have 9 questions from you here. I'm going to pull up the first 5 and I just want you to talk us through a couple, maybe your favorites, where you start. Let me know what's best.
Beautiful. We'll go step by step. I'm very simple, right? So the very first one. This is a great question, especially early on to really uncover. So this is assuming you've uncovered all the core things that they want. You've uncovered the pains, the problems, etc. And you're going to be diving now into what I call the decision-making process, if you will. And it's really, really simple. So for example, number 1, hey, so let's assume we proceed forward and you decide our solution is the best fit for your needs. Who's all involved in bringing in a vendor like us? So this is intentionally just an open question you're going to throw out there. Now, obviously, you can tweak this over time and you can build context because of your role, but this is just designed to open them up so you can see what's going on. And what I've found, generally speaking, is sometimes they have no idea.
Yeah.
And that's okay. So that allows you to start diving in deeper. And you'll see there's some other prompt questions help with that, right? Because sometimes we get happy ears, especially when we talk to what's known as a technical buyer. So a technical buyer, and this is based off strategic selling, a technical buyer is someone that can't say yes, but they can say no. They ultimately kind of screen you out, if you will. So they'll say something like this. They'll say, hey, Leslie, oh, it's pretty much my decision. I just need to run it past Bob real quick. Or I just got to run by some people internally real quick. So they really play off the other people. So that's an example. You might hear that. So that tells you like, okay, you don't want to get happy ears there, because sometimes we
Right.
get happy. We're like, oh, they just told me they're the decision maker. Actually, they just told you they are not the decision maker. They just told you there's other people involved, which is okay. They might pull the trigger still. They might actually even sign the DocuSign, but they are still influenced by other people. So we want to find out who is actually what's known as the economic buyer. And it's the person that can say yes when everyone else says no, and they can say no when everyone else says yes. For instance, like I've had this happen before where, let's just say, for example, if they have budgeted $100,000 for this project, right? They need to get one last approval from somebody else. That somebody else can take the 100K and move it elsewhere. They have more power, right? Or they could say, hey, it's not enough. We can allocate more resources. I can actually pull from this other department and move budget over. So that is a true economic buyer right there. They can actually have power to move and release funds or completely reallocate funds. So when you ask that question, it tees it up. Okay, I think it also involves so-and-so, but it's pretty much me. Now you can go deeper. Hey, cool. What's that exact process look like step by step? In your mind, I want you to imagine if your prospect had to take out a Google Doc and write down an instruction manual for how to get a deal done, what's that look like? What's step 1, step 2, step 3? So for instance, they get done with the conversation today. What do they do next? Do they go back and write a business case up? Do they first gather some information from other lower level stakeholders? Do they talk to other department heads first? Do they go through legal first? Do they go to CFO first? And we don't want to assume, so we want to start diving in. What's that process look like exactly? Who's all involved? Notice even how my tonality is shifting a little bit, right? So depending on the prospect, I may need to adjust it to get them to feel comfortable sharing the information. Because what we want here is the truth allows you to guide the conversation, move it differently. So for instance, if part of the process, they say, yeah, it's pretty much my decision. Of course, like I'm gonna talk to my team first, like some of my engineers on my team, and then, but it's gonna be me. I'm gonna sign off on everything. It's gonna be me. I don't need to remind anybody else. I'm just gonna make sure my team's bought in. So maybe they are the economic buyer, but now there's potentially engineers you have to get bought in. Oh, interesting. Hey, tell me a little more about making sure your team is bought in. What do you mean by that specifically? So you can see how this starts to rabbit hole a little bit, right? Where you might go in a different path. So now you might find out, hey, so on your engineering team, are you gonna talk to all of them, or are there certain people that maybe you really trust? They're kind of your locker room leaders that you really value their feedback. Oh yeah, for sure. There is Lisa. She's our chief engineer. She's been coming for like 10 years. I'm gonna get her feedback. She's also a grumpy person, so I know she'll give it to me straight. Great. Hey, aside from Lisa, is there anybody else? So now we're diving deeper just to uncover even who those players are, because now you could just rely on unless you're trying to sell to them,
Right.
or that may shift your whole process. So now you want to introduce maybe a proof of concept or a trial, or you want to have a separate meeting with Lisa or any other XYZ stakeholders. This really will shift your process because now you're diving in deep.
You hit on a couple things I just want to like zoom into really quick. So the first one is your tone, because I think sometimes like it can be off-putting and people are like, it's me. I'm the only person you need to talk to right now, right? They don't want to get other people involved because they're afraid of what that looks like. So I think
100%.
like that tone piece that you mentioned is so important. And then someone mentioned in the chat here, how do you know what you're getting is correct? How do you know if that research is right? Is there any cues that you feel? I see that you're like digging in deeper. A lot of it's your tone.
Mhm.
Is there something you do to check yourself there?
100%. So there's a couple things. So even before you walk into whether it's the first call or X number of calls, you should have a hypothesis potentially of how the process is actually decided. Because sometimes some companies have no idea because maybe they never made a purchasing decision before of the magnitude you're potentially selling, or maybe they're smaller, they don't have a formal SOP, standard operating procedure. So you can also bring a hypothesis to the table. So let's say, for example, yeah, that's a good question. I'm not really sure, but I'll probably involve the CEO. So then you could say, okay, hey, listen, so typically what we have seen, such as when I was working with Sell Better, is we actually met with X person here, X, Y person there, and they're in these roles because their feedback's really valuable. Potentially that may make sense in your situation. What do you think? So you tee it up as well. And if you've done the homework of even like researching who the names are, you mention them. For example, I was meeting with a sales director who wanted me to come and basically train their team. And I knew there's a sales VP and a CEO. So I asked a very similar question. What's that process look like? They're like, oh, I think it's pretty much me. I'm like, well, generally speaking, I'm not a rookie here. This is what I found. You, a company your size and your org type, usually we want to get feedback and buy-in, at least from this sales VP. I think his name is Mike, and the owner, Albert. Do you think that they may potentially want to have influence on the decision of potentially who you want to choose for sales training? And they're like, yeah, that's a good point. I think they actually probably will. I'm like, got it. So now we can go deeper and really start setting the next steps as part of it. So that's really, really important. So in terms of answering the question of like, how do I know if what they're new is correct? There's a couple of things you want to look for. So number one, what's their body language look like? This is really important. These are some of the subtleties of sales that people don't talk about, but they're like, if they're like, I think you can tell like the confidence shifts. Their tonality is like uncertain. And that's really important. Now it's not 100%, but if they say, nope, it's 100% me, there's nobody else. And if you're not sure, you can pressure test a little bit. Say, hey, listen, so typically what I found in similar types of organizations, this is who else is also involved. Does it happen to be the same case in your situation, or is it totally different? Nope, totally different. It's literally just me. I've been here 20 years. I make all the decisions. Like there's nobody else. Okay. So at some point, you got to take them for face value a little bit. Their tonality is confident. Their conviction is high, and they're saying that. Now, what's great is if they're telling you these things and they seem very certain in it, the beautiful part is if they tell you it must be true. So down the road in your sales process, if it suddenly shifts, this allows you to utilize that as ammunition to bring back up. Because if suddenly they're like, oh, we need to involve Albert, the CEO, it's got to make sense. Tell me a little more about that. You can go a little bit deeper. And then it's very easy to bring back like and say, hey, listen, I'm a little confused. So when you and I spoke actually a couple of weeks ago, you had mentioned it was 100% your decision. And I'm confused now because it sounds like Albert wants to be involved. Did something change between our last conversation and today?
Yeah.
So it's a very clear, direct conversation, but notice even my tonality. Notice even like I'm smiling while I'm saying it.
Right. Because it could be something that's uncomfortable, but you're like lifting some of that discomfort for them.
100%. So this is valuable because really at the end of the day, all you care about is getting to the truth.
Yeah.
That's what you want, because then you know if it's really a truly qualified opportunity, or are you working with a tire kicker who's going to basically spin your wheels and waste your time and will inflate your pipeline inaccurately, which you don't want.
No, we don't want that. Your managers don't want that. I think that leads you really nicely. Like you're asking all these questions and then asking what's the most important. Number 4 here, what's most important for them is giving you ammo for your next call potentially, or what you're going to send them in terms of what they can take to their team.
That's right. So this is powerful, right? You start finding out like, hey, so tell me like what's most important for them? How does this align to their initiatives? So this is like really powerful now because you're just doing your homework with your next conversation is going to be with that person or multiple people. It guides you a little bit as well. But on top of that, based on your experience, what are they most critical about? These type of things help you understand what's the thought process of that person. So even if you write a multi-thread email, which you should, after this to that person, you can sync some of these things back to them. So this helps you bridge the gap and start working with other stakeholders as well as part of the process. So that's really valuable. Most are just trying to focus on trying to sell a singular person. But the reality is you can have probably between 5 to 7 different stakeholders in the majority of deals, if not more, especially at enterprise. So the more you can gather the lay of the land, pictures, it's almost like sports. You're going to watch game tapes of your competitors and you're just trying to see who all the players are. What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? And based off the players on the table, I'm going to determine different plays I'm going to run. And this is basically what you're doing. You have a hypothesis already that you do your research on, but now when you're actually live with a person that's at their company, a representative, you can uncover more stuff. And it could be right or it could be wrong. We don't really know. We're going to trust them as much as we can based on how they deliver the information, but we're going to use that information now to help us with other parts of the process because it's far easier now. For example, like you get a lot of information here, and let's say maybe when you meet let's call it the CXO, now you have a really powerful point of view you can bring to the table. So it's much better to say, hey, listen, based on my conversation with Leslie, she had told me your core initiatives are X, Y, and Z for the next 5 years of the organization. Because of that, talking with Leslie, this is what we uncovered as the challenges. So here's potentially how I see how we can fit in our solution to help you with this. Is that correct? Does that sound right? If you did a really good job, they're like, wow, you nailed it. That's exactly our situation. Okay. They're more apt to actually have a conversation now with you.
Yeah, Tim and Laura in the chat talking about like differences in regions. Usually if I'm selling UK in general, I'll ask permission for that first before the multi-threading and just be like, hey, is it okay if I copy this person in? And then my bonus is that I always compliment the person that I've been working with as like a starter. If it's, especially if it's going up the chain, hey, it's been awesome working with Marcus and the way that he captures your company. He's such a great ambassador for your organization
100%.
and he's so strategic. And here's all the things, like whatever it is, to like make sure that I'm propping him up if it's going up the chain. But I'm always asking permission first from that person before I do that.
That's right. That's
But I
exactly
do think
right.
there's definitely some regional differences.
100%.
Take some nuance in there. I want to get to I see some questions in the Q&A section. If you have other questions you want to add in there, you can also upvote other people's if you want to get those answered. We'll jump to that as soon as we wrap up. There's a few more discovery questions that I want you to grab a few here.
Yeah, let's jam on these. So, what other concerns do you believe they may have? So, this is powerful because let's just say, for example, like in some situations, you will just never ever talk to the economic buyer. That's just a reality. Obviously, we do our best to get in front of them, but that's just, it may happen, right? But here's the thing. Sometimes I find with some of our champions, they also get happy ears too. They get really excited because their problems are going to get solved, right? You've done a great job selling to them, and they think it's going to be a slam dunk selling internally, and they actually have not thought through how they're going to sell internally in the worst case scenario. So questions like this starts getting them to think, yeah, what if they say no, basically? So it's, hey, so what other concerns do you believe that they may have, right? And get and stop talking. And just like, these are intentionally be like one at a time because you want them to like think it through. Like, let's sink in. And you can also build some context around this. For example, might be like, hey, Leslie, so obviously, Bob, you've known for like 10 years. You've worked with him for a long time. I'm sure you probably have tried to bring other products to the table with Bob. Based off our conversation, what do you believe might be some other concerns that they might have? So this, again, opens them up because you can start thinking, actually, like, Bob's a real stickler about X. Okay. So if Bob is a stickler about X, what do you believe we should do right now to make sure we eliminate that potential concern he might have? What do you recommend we do up front to ensure it's addressed before it even occurs? It's the same type of question, right? So this is like really intentional because this gets them thinking through a selling strategy. Remember, most of these people, unless you sell into a sales org, well, actually, let me back up. Even if you do sell to sales organizations, most people are really bad at selling internally. They have no idea how to do it. Most of them lack the skills and acumen to actually influence internally to get deals done, get things done. We have to guide them and teach them how to do this. So this is really important, especially, let's say, for example, if it's a CFO, right? You can say, hey, listen, and they don't bring it up. Hey, listen, usually I find for other organizations, if you're selling, since we have to get Tom, the CFO, on board, usually they want to see a business case to really prove out the ROI. Like, do you feel that's going to happen in our situation here? So they may not be thinking that, but they're like, yeah, actually, I think so. Okay, cool. So usually what I recommend is you and I work on drum together. So this way you go in, we have a case to work together. Would that be fair? That makes a lot of sense. Cool. I'm curious, so is Tom even aware the problem exists? So I want to find out now, what's the awareness level of Tom or the CXO, right? So that, again, this helps you uncover like things that you might need to have them do next.
Conversation hasn't happened. The likelihood of your deal closing, especially within a given timeline, is like decreasing as the minutes
Right.
pass.
100%. So now you can change your strategy completely. It's like, all right, cool. You and I need to build a business case, Leslie. This is your job, though, between now and our conversation in a week to build a business case, is I need you to set up time. Don't talk about me. Don't talk about our solution. I literally want you to set up time with Tom, bring him a state of the union of the current problem and the impact. Your number one goal is to make sure Tom is on board, understand there's a big problem that needs to be solved, and you're going to look for solutions. You don't have one yet. Is that a fair ask? So that's like getting them to think ahead. They're like, oh, okay, you're right. So you can see how when you do a deeper discovery, it actually will shift how you run the process because we know it's going to have multiple stakeholders. We have to make sure we know what the rules of engagement are so we can run the game effectively.
I think this is the definition of getting on the same side and selling together.
That's right.
And being able to gain that trust. I do want a quick hot take from you. You gave us all these great questions to ask. What are some questions that you feel like we should avoid asking? Maybe some of the ones that have been out there for a while floating around. Do you have any things where you're like, avoid this at all costs?
Oh, yeah. First off, generally really cheesy questions I find generally just don't really work. So for instance, one of the ones, and this is actually, this was years ago, I remember my company bought out another company, huge, because this is a $1 billion company they bought out. And this company, this is like the rep's favorite question to ask, which was what's known as the magic wand question. So they would go to prospects and say, listen, I want you to imagine I had a magic wand. If I could wave this magic wand and it would solve all your problems and have a dream solution for you, what would that look like? Now, I feel stupid even saying that out loud. But this is like their number one go-to question. And then kind of sad things is I listen to call recording from clients and some of them I incorporate that. I'm like, whoa, time out. Let's stop asking that question. That is number one, it sounds cheesy, right? It doesn't really make sense. And number two, like, why are you asking that? So questions like that's like weird, right? Don't ask questions like that. Another one are questions that will, like, your prospects are smart and sophisticated, are questions that are trapping your prospect, right? Do you want to save money with your business? Yeah, of course. Do you want to make more money with your business? Of course. Do you want to be more efficient? Yeah, of course I'll be more efficient. So like questions like those, ultimately what happens is they decrease your credibility. Buyers today, they have probably reached out to probably 10 plus channels before they even have a conversation with you. So you want to make sure that time you have with them, you're asking questions that actually drive impact and show you're not like any other sales professional, right? And most sales professionals are not going to ask questions that I've already shared so far. They ask maybe a very surface level, but they don't go deeper. So you don't want to ask these terrible questions I just said. So you want to be able to have that impact and go deeper. So you actually pull out the real magic, which is really deep in the root of the question.
I think that it can erode trust too. Some of those things where you're trapping them, and then that's going to lead to where we get the really surface level or the kind of separate questions. There's a few things in the chat here. When people have their cameras off or you're on like an old school phone call and you're doing your discovery that way, is there a way to interpret body language? Are there like certain verbal clues instead of visual clues that you're looking for?
Great. The beautiful part is I've been selling for a long time, so we started on the phones.
Yeah. No camera back.
So there was no camera back then. So you actually had, it's almost like, generally speaking, if you lose one sense, hopefully your other senses become much more tuned, heightened, if you will. So on the phones, like I would listen very intently to actually the exact verbiage they would use to their tonality. Right. So let me give you an example. So if I say, hey, listen, let's assume this goes really well. Aside from myself, is anybody else you need to consult with internally before you bring a vendor like us on board? And they say something like, oh, it's pretty much me. Pretty much me. The exact vernacular of those words is not decisive. It's not crisp. It's not concise. It's not tight. And to me, it's like, oh, interesting. Pretty much is a totally different thing. So if I ask my kid it's how karate was, like, oh, well, I tried. You tried? Like, to me, it's a different level. So understand the words they use are important, but also how they say it. Right. So is there a level of conviction and confidence? Now, take this with a grain of salt because there's different personality types you sell into. So if they have more amiable personality, they're not going to be like, 100% it's me. But they might say something like, it's my decision. So if I'm not unsure, if it comes off a little soft still because they're amiable, I might say, cool, just make sure I'm on the same page. Awesome. So typically I want to talk to someone like yourself, Leslie. You usually involve X, Y, and Z decision makers. Is that happen to be the same in your case or not at all in your situation? Nope, not at all. Okay. All right. Like you got to take it at one point. Eventually you have to say, all right, I feel pretty good about that, right? But it's a judgment call on the spot you got to make, but it might potentially be a pink flag depending on how they say it still.
If you are in the chat here and you haven't met Marcus before, he has so many more like really cool frameworks and just puts out a ton of content around good questions to be asking, how to ask them. I think more the soft skills too that are harder to grasp onto in just like a really easy way. So I do want to drop your YouTube channel and your LinkedIn for anyone who wants to connect with you. Honestly, time flew way too fast today.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So we're at time, but go check out Marcus's YouTube channel because there are some really cool frameworks there. This is like scratching the surface. We need another show, Marcus.
We'll have like a 4-hour show next time.
Yeah, let's put it on the book. Done. I love it. I so appreciate you being here with us. Thank you for sharing just like this gems of digging into discovery. We're putting it on the books. I'm messaging you right after this.
Sounds good.
We need to chat more.
Thanks for having me on. Thanks everyone for being here. That was awesome.